Good morning or afternoon, everyone, as the case may be. My computer had some issues today, so a little late. Sorry about that. If you recall, we ended last time talking about the Frankish kingdoms, how Clovis united the kingdoms, and then his four sons separated the kingdoms again, and then his grandson separated it even further, and they went back to just a bunch of squabbling local warlords. And then these kings became known as the do-nothing kings because they're more willing to sit back and relax and enjoy the perks of being king without actually doing the job of the king. And the real power is from the major domo, or mayor domo, the mayor of the palace. He's the one doing the job of king, and eventually they're going to be the ones who claim the title of king from the Merovingians. This guy's Pepin II. He became a mayor of the palace for one of the more powerful kings, and he defeated all his rival mayors of the palaces and basically reunited the kingdoms in the name of his king, who's not important because it's Pepin doing the actual fighting and planning and strategizing and all that. His son Charles Martel was a very famous dude. Perhaps you remember Charles Martel is the one who kept the Muslims from taking over all of Europe. So the Muslim Jihad went all across North Africa in just a few years, and then it went up to Spain, and they conquered Spain very easily. And then they went across the Pyrenees Mountains into France, and it was Charles Martel, the Hammer, who stopped them at the Battle of Tours in 732. So the Muslim Empire just exploded in all directions. They came up here, and Tours is around here somewhere. Their army pushed deep into Frankish territory, but Charles Martel, a mayor of the palace, not a king, a mayor of the palace, was the one who united the Frankish armies to fight against the Muslims, and that is why Europe remained under Catholic control and not Muslim. Battle of Tours, 732, very important. Charles's son Pepin the Short, you're gonna see some amazing nicknames coming up, by the way. So this is Pepin the Third. Everyone calls him the Short. He said, "You know what? My grandpa was the most amazing king ever. My dad was a great king as well, and I'm a great king, but none of us have had the title of king. We have all the jobs, all the responsibilities, really all the benefits, but not the respect that we need for being a king." So he went right up to the Pope and said, "Pope, declare that I'm the king, and the actual couch potato king is a nobody, so I can kick him off the couch and take the palace for myself." And the Pope said, "You know what? The one wielding power ought to be king." And so the Pope crowned Pepin the Short king of the Franks. And there he is. By the way, you could see this very early symbol of the king, blue background and golden fleur-de-lis. It's a, it's a lily. By the way, you also see here the church completely dominating and controlling Europe. The Pope gets to decide who's king and who's not. The Pope not only crowned him, he anointed him with holy oil, saying, basically, not only are you the political leader, but God has chosen you. That's what anointed means. So if anyone disagrees with you, they're actually disagreeing with God. And that is not biblical, but that's what he did. And they named their new dynasty after Charlemagne, who isn't even around yet. This is not the Pepinius dynasty. This is not the Short People dynasty. This is the Carolingian dynasty because its most famous ruler is not its first ruler, Charlemagne, Carolus Magnus. The Pope asked for help because a group of barbarians called the Lombards were invading northern Italy and were encroaching on their lands. This dark purple here is the Papal States. The Pope owned a good chunk of Italy. He is a warlord. He is a nobleman, just like all the other noblemen. And here's the Lombardians who are attacking and taking his land. So he needed extra help. He asked for help, and who should come to the rescue but Pepin? Pepin defeated those Lombards pretty easily and conquered much of their land. And instead of keeping it for himself and making the Frankish kingdom bigger, he gave it to the Pope and made the Catholic kingdom bigger. Now, why would he do that? Why would he give up all this free territory that he just rightfully earned? Well, obviously, He wants spiritual power. He wants everyone to think that he's spiritual. He wants to buy his way into heaven. He wants to get on the Pope's good side. There's also this one good deed deserves another. So the Pope crowned me king. Now I'm going to rescue his rear, and we'll call it even. And maybe I can get the Pope to do me more favors later on, especially after I die. And this is called the Donation of Pepin, and it was very famous. People talked about it for centuries, about this Frankish king who gave up all this power to give it to the Pope. He's not the only one who gives land to the Pope. Tons of noblemen donate some land to the church after they die, but of course not whole kingdoms. Now, the Pope has a ton of spiritual power. He can crown kings and unmake kings. Now he also has a ton of political power as well. He has land, he has soldiers, he has an army, he has cities full of people that he's taxing, and he is a king of Europe as well as the king of your soul. You know, he is a very powerful person, both spiritually and politically, and that's not great. Pepin's sons were named Charlemagne and Charles, and they were co-rulers for a little while. Remember how it was the Frankish idea, how your sons all inherit equal shares? Well, Daddy said, instead of dividing the kingdom in half and making one king of the east and one king of the west, why don't we make you both king over all of it? I don't think that was a really good idea either, but then Carloman died. And now Charles is the only king of all of France. He is so outstanding, he is so amazing, and we're going to talk about why. He gains the title Charles the Great, or Carolus Magnus in Latin, or Charlemagne. Charles the Great. There are very few rulers who have been given the title the Great, and here is one of them. I can think of Peter the Great and Catherine the Great in Russia, of course Alexander the Great from Greece. Very, very few rulers have been called the Great, and here is one of them, and for very good reason. By the way, take a look at that crown. That crown's in a museum in France today, and it is absolutely gorgeous. Just plates full of gold, emeralds, you know, the size of big old pebbles, and this little thingy up on top with the cross. Oh, beautiful. Charlemagne was very tall, like 6'4", 6'5", maybe. Very tall, very physically strong. He loved jousting and fighting, and he was always fighting at the head of the army, and no one could beat him in one-on-one combat. He was like a superhero. It reminds me an awful lot of King Saul, head and shoulders above everyone else, and loves going out picking fights. Sometimes he was a really great person, very moral, noble, full of compassion. Sometimes he did some really ruthless things. For instance, there was a lot of immorality, and it was just assumed that if you're rich and powerful, you could sleep with whoever you wanted. And that was even going on in the church. And he said no. He cracked down on that hard, made laws. Basically, if you cheat on your wife and you're a nobleman, you get kicked out. If you're a church member, you get kicked out. On the other hand, he talked a lot about spreading Christianity, and the way he did that was line up people with a sword at their necks and saying, convert or die, which is exactly what the Muslims did and still do sometimes. And of course, that is not how Jesus or the apostles acted, and I don't think that's going to give a real conversion. Charlemagne is so famous and such a great king that he is literally the king of hearts. Look up sometime. The four kings are representing four different actual kings of history. Let me see if I remember them. I know one of them's King David, one of them is Alexander the Great, one of them is Charlemagne. I think the other one is Richard the Lionheart from England. So, I mean, there's four kings, and Charlemagne's one of the top four kings in Europe. That's pretty impressive. So the Lombards were attacking the Pope again. This is a few decades after his daddy rescued them. And so Charlemagne raises an army and goes down and rescues the Pope for a second time. This is the second time that a Frankish king rescued the Pope, and it's only been a couple decades. This time, Charlemagne claims a lot of Lombardian land and gives himself the title King of the Lombards. So now he's King of the Franks and King of the Lombards. This is now an empire. An empire is when you control two or more people groups. There's two separate kingdoms, and I'm in charge of both. He's in charge of the Frankish kingdom. Now he's in charge of the Lombardy kingdom as well. And he is going to conquer several other neighbors and become emperor over quite a few different people groups. Next, he turns north and attacks the Saxons. And there's a picture on page 179. There's a map there. And you can see how the Lombards lived in a lot of northern Italy and like Switzerland and Austria. And the Saxons are all, up in Germany. So he goes and attacks Germany, does really well against them for many years. Here's a map as well. And you can see here's the Lombardians in light red. And here's the Pope in pink. And Saxons would be all up here, and he's attacking them. I believe the light color means places that are under a little less control, so he gives them a little bit more freedom, but they're still doing whatever he says. And he carves out a good chunk of Central Europe for himself. His green is all Muslim, Slavic, and Russians over there. He pushes the Avars and Muslims back in that direction, or Avars over here, Muslims in Spain, and got the biggest empire in Europe since Rome. It's not that huge, but considering that the Franks used to own this much land, and now they own that much land, that's really impressive, considering that no one else had a huge kingdom like this since the fall of Rome, which has been 500 years. It is pretty impressive. They called him Papa Europae, the father of Europe. He divided the land into hundreds and hundreds of districts with a new noble title, the title of Count. Like Count here from Sesame Street. Whenever you see an empire, you got to think logistics. Logistics means just the day-to-day administration and paperwork and how to get stuff done. It's one thing to just say, hey, everyone do this. But then getting your will done is going to require a lot of management and oversight. And he divided it into small chunks so that these counts could have decent oversight over each little corner of his empire. And then he was worried that the noblemen would break up the empire and declare their independence, and the noblemen would fight against him and try to carve out chunks of the empire for himself. So he had to have people watch the noblemen. He created a group of people called the Missi Dominici, or the king's messengers, the king's men. And they would go 2 by 2 to each different countdom, or county, you might say. County? That is literally where we get the word county, is a place that counts rule over. Anyway, these Missi Dominici would make sure everything's in order, make sure the count is obeying the king, making sure, the taxes are up to code and all that. And to make sure that the Missi Dominici were doing the king's will, they went in pairs of 2. It's much harder to bribe 2 people than to bribe 1 person. And then he also had them rotate. So you would have these people move from county to county over the years, so they hopefully would not be corrupt. Charlemagne ruled more land since the Roman Empire, and on Christmas Day, 800 AD, the Pope crowned him not king, not even just emperor, Roman emperor. He is the emperor of Rome. The Pope says, that Charlemagne's empire is the new Rome. That is amazing. Ever since the fall of Rome, people have been trying to rebuild Rome. And you could see it easily in just the names of their kings. First of all, you have Charlemagne calling himself the Roman Emperor. Then you have in Germany, they called their king the Kaiser, which means Caesar. And in Russia, they called their king the Tsar, Caesar, which means Caesar. Everyone wants to be like Rome, and Charlemagne is no exception. So just like he crowned his dad, king of Franks, he's going to crown Charlemagne emperor of Rome. And there's a picture of the Pope crowning Charlemagne. Once again, even though Charlemagne is super powerful, it's not him, crowning himself. It is the Pope making him the emperor. Charlemagne loved learning and he valued it. At that, a little bit before his time, the kings and noblemen, they were just warlords. They were thugs. They just went around beating people up. And so a lot of them never bothered to learn how to read. A lot of them didn't care about learning. They did not hire scholars. They did not care about architecture or anything. Charlemagne said, that's kind of stupid. We need to learn how to read. So he built his city, his capital city, Aachen, into a city of hospitals and universities and schools of all kinds and monasteries. And he said, I want Aachen to rival Rome. I want it to be the new Rome in every way possible. I want it to be a cultural center. So here is the cathedral at Aachen. It is absolutely gorgeous. I love it. It's almost as famous as Notre Dame, and it's much cooler now that Notre Dame burned. They are rebuilding it. It's going to take years to rebuild the roof of Notre Dame. But man, absolutely gorgeous. I love it. True Gothic architecture, a lot of Romanesque as well. That would be the earlier stuff. There were very few scholars in France because no one valued that at the time. So for his university to have teachers, he had to put out advertisements all throughout Europe, and he hired scholars from all around Europe. He even hired a personal tutor for himself, and he went to bed at night with his tablet, a wax tablet, and a stylus under his bed because he didn't sleep very well. And when he woke up in the middle of the night, he wanted to practice his handwriting or his reading. He found that learning how to read when you're 50 or something, I don't know how old he was when he started, but learning how to read as an adult is much, much more difficult than you might imagine learning as a little kid. Can't teach an old dog new tricks, they say. So yeah, really cool. This is Alcuin of York. York is in northern England, and that is his personal tutor. Notice that he is a monk, and the Catholic Church was basically the source of knowledge at this time. And a big part of their job was to copy books. It was very difficult to copy books. Books were very expensive, very rare, and it took forever to write them out by hand. Can you imagine writing out the entire Bible by hand with a pen, and not even a nice pen like we have today, a quill? They have to keep on dipping in the ink. And you make one mistake, there's no erasing it. You have to start that page all over again. So yeah, that took a long time. But they did it. Excuse me. He wanted the church people to know how to read because unfortunately there were plenty of monks who couldn't even read the Bible. And he said, well, that's kind of stupid. How can you preach if you can't read the Bible? The answer is they memorized the message. There was one mass ritual, and they memorized the mass and spoke it every week without actually being able to read the Bible at all. And Charlemagne said, that's not okay. You need to be able to read. He also invented Carolingian minuscule. This is really cool. This is lowercase. Back in the day, there was only uppercase letters. So if you ever seen someone on Facebook or Twitter or something, all uppercase, and it's like they're yelling at you, it's like, whoa, that's what they did there. They also did not have any spacing between the letters. So all uppercase, just keep on going. No spacing, no punctuation, no periods. Can you imagine how difficult that would be to read? And he says, let's make it easier to read by inventing a lowercase that's really easy to distinguish. You could distinguish the beginning of words much easier. He produced a lot of long-lasting changes. He did a lot of good. He standardized weights and measures, not a very exciting thing, but something that helped an awful lot. Invented a better coining system, lots of new technology and thoughts and universities and things. It was a really cool empire, but it broke up very, very quickly. And why is that? Because as soon as Charlemagne died, his 3 sons broke it into 3. Sorry, 3 grandsons broke it into 3. After a civil war, the 3 brothers signed this peace treaty, the Treaty of Verdun. Maybe you recognize that name. World War I had a gigantic battle at Verdun where like over 1 million people died. Northern France, somewhere around here. Yeah, three different French kingdoms. Maybe you recognize this is the Kingdom of Germany today, kind of, Kingdom of France today, and the Kingdom of Northern Italy, and then a little bit, and of course, the Papal States. Uh, again, with the names. Charles the Bald gets France. Charles the Bald. By the way, do you know what Charlemagne's mama's name was? Bigfoot Bertha. Bertha au Grand Pied. Bigfoot Bertha. That's actually what they called her. It's so silly. Louis the German got the East, and that is why they call Germany Germany, because he's Louis the German. Modern Germany is related to modern France. And Lothair is in the middle. He kind of gets the worst land, but he gets the title Emperor, even though he's not really an emperor. Very quickly, Lothair loses a good chunk of his land and just becomes king of northern Italy. And then he dies. Okay, so internally, the kingdom fell because three grandsons split into three. Externally, there was a lot of bad guys attacking them. Well, I don't know about bad guys, just everyone's attacking each other, right? So there's Muslims who have these piracies going all throughout the Mediterranean. They have pirate ships that attack any shipping and enslave people. Then they even raid the southern coast of France and start attacking coastal cities as well, and carrying off slaves and money and goods and stuff. A group of people called Magyars came in, just like the Franks came in a couple hundred years before and settled there. A group of Magyars now migrate towards Europe, and they attack and cause a bunch of trouble. And then they finally settle down, and they call the area Hungary, which means Hun land. Do you know what the Hungarian name for Hungary is? Magyar land, because they're Magyars, not Huns. The Vikings are raiding all over. They go up the rivers. Most big cities are on a river, so they keep on going up the rivers with a big army attacking. What almost always happens is they besiege a city. They don't have the siege equipment to attack the city, but they have this huge army, and we're just going to starve you out. And eventually the city gives them a ton of cash, and they run away or walk away. And so eventually they stop fighting as much and just show up with an army and say, give me 50 million bucks and I'll go. And they're paid off every year to just go away. There's the Vikings raiding all over. And here's some Viking invasion routes. A lot of them coming from Denmark. They're the Danes. And then the Northmen from Scandinavia, Norway and Sweden. They're attacking all over. They go to Iceland, they go to Greenland, they go to Canada, they attack England and Ireland until Brian Boru forces them out. He's a cool guy. They attack all the way up the Seine River to Paris, burn down Paris on at least one occasion, attack Bremen, all up Germany and all that. Come down to Spain. They even come all the way up to Rome eventually. Those Vikings attacked everywhere they could reach by water, which was just about everywhere. So, of course, with everyone attacking, Charlemagne's empire was really cool, but pretty short-lived.